After graduating from college, a 21-year-old British woman decided to fulfill her lifelong dream of traveling the world. One of the stops on this journey of a lifetime was New Zealand. There, she met a man and spent what seemed to be a pleasant evening with him. Surveillance footage later showed her stepping into an elevator with him. The next day, she was supposed to celebrate her 22nd birthday, but she never made it. What happened that night? Was it a tragic accident, or something far more sinister? The mystery surrounding Grace Millane's disappearance would soon grip an entire nation, and New Zealand police were determined to uncover the truth. Dark File: Chilling True Stories. Grace, a British citizen, had her whole life ahead of her. She came from a loving and well-off family and had never lacked for anything. She was cheerful, kind, and deeply compassionate. She supported numerous charities, organized fundraisers, and even donated her long hair, something she had always treasured, to help children with cancer. Despite having many friends and an active social life, Grace was always focused on her studies. In 2018, she earned her bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing from the University of Lincoln. Though she was ambitious and eager to continue her education, Grace decided to take a break and recharge before pursuing her next steps. She planned a solo journey across the globe, something she had dreamed of for years. That October, she began her travels in South America, spending 6 unforgettable weeks in Peru. She documented everything with photos and kept in daily contact with her family. Although she was thousands of miles from home, she never made her loved ones worry. She called, messaged, and shared her experiences constantly. Her next destination was New Zealand. On Friday, November 30th, 2018, she arrived in Auckland, the country's largest city. She checked into a popular budget hostel, known to attract young backpackers from around the world.
Grace, being naturally outgoing and friendly, quickly bonded with other travelers. She even chose to share a room with one of them. Everyone she met remembered her as a warm, vibrant, and endlessly cheerful young woman, someone who lit up every space she entered.
The female company was certainly pleasant, but Grace was hoping to meet a nice local guy, someone who could show her around, point out a few interesting sights, and maybe even take her to a fun club over the weekend. To make that happen, she turned to a dating app. That evening, she opened Tinder, hoping to find a friendly companion. While browsing through a few profiles, the British traveler came across a 26-year-old man, and the feeling was mutual. He was immediately charmed by Grace's beauty. After a short exchange of messages, they agreed to meet the following day, Saturday afternoon, December 1st.
From the moment she woke up, Grace was excited about the date. She wrote to a friend back in England, sharing her enthusiasm. With each new message, the guy seemed more and more interesting. He talked a lot about himself, how he came from a broken family, enjoyed sports, and had worked a variety of jobs, including as a bartender, salesman, and construction worker. He was smart, resourceful, and most of all, funny. They shared the same taste in movies and music, and he didn't hide the fact that he liked Grace a lot.
When their meeting, originally meant to be just a casual outing, was later described as a blind date, the 21-year-old didn't object. She wore her favorite dress and carefully applied her makeup. Grace arrived at the agreed location 15 minutes early. City surveillance cameras captured her at 5:45 p.m. at a large entertainment complex filled with restaurants, bars, shops, and even a casino. It was a vibrant hub, perhaps the best place in Auckland to spend a fun evening. She waited by a large Christmas tree, which she photographed and sent to her parents. When her date arrived, she recognized him instantly. Smiling, she greeted him, and he pulled her in for a warm hug. Together, they headed toward a nearby restaurant. After dinner, they moved on to a more laid-back Mexican bar. It wasn't as upscale, but the drinks were good and cheap. CCTV cameras captured the two of them laughing, chatting, and clearly enjoying each other's company. At one point, the man confidently pulled Grace closer, hugged her, and kissed her. She didn't seem to mind. Similar affectionate gestures followed throughout the next hour. While he stepped away briefly to use the restroom, Grace texted a friend.
The evening is wonderful. I'm having a great time. I couldn't have found better company.
The couple left the complex around 9 p.m. By 9:15, surveillance footage recorded them walking together toward the Sky City Hotel, where Jesse had rented an apartment.
At exactly 9:40 p.m., hotel elevator cameras recorded the pair stepping inside. A minute later, they exited on one of the upper floors. That was the last time Grace Millane was ever seen alive.
The next day, Sunday, December 2nd, was Grace's 22nd birthday. From early morning, her Facebook page filled with birthday wishes. But something was off. She didn't respond to any of them. That was unusual. Grace was the kind of person who always replied, even to the most trivial messages. Her social media remained silent, and so did her phone. This sudden silence began to worry her family. Both her parents and her brother were waiting anxiously to hear from her. They wanted to wish her a happy birthday and ask how she was enjoying her stay in New Zealand. They tried calling her, but her phone was either off or out of range. Maybe her battery had died. Maybe she had just lost track of time. At first, they came up with different explanations, but they all ended the same way. She'll call soon. She always does. But Grace didn't call. Not on Sunday. Not on Monday. Their concern slowly turned into fear. Something they hadn't wanted to admit was beginning to feel real. They could no longer chalk it up to being busy or distracted. The lack of contact wasn't just odd, it was alarming. On Wednesday, December 5th, Grace's father contacted the police in New Zealand and officially reported her missing. That same day, her brother posted a missing person notice on Instagram. Alongside the poster, he wrote,
"My sister has been missing for 5 days. She didn't return to her hostel in New Zealand, and none of us have heard from her since Saturday, December 1st. We've already contacted the embassy. Please share this post and reach out if you have any information about where she might be."
British authorities immediately contacted their counterparts in New Zealand. Local officers accepted the missing persons report and launched a search for the young tourist. They confirmed that Grace Millane had left her hostel on the afternoon of December 1st and had not returned since. At first, however, there was no solid indication that Grace had been the victim of foul play. At least, that's what the New Zealand police told her increasingly worried family. Behind the scenes, though, officers weren't ruling anything out.
"We had no clues, no leads. No one had seen her. No one knew where she might have gone. Eventually, we learned that just before her disappearance, she had gone to meet a local man we knew nothing about. At that point, we had to consider the worst."
The police reviewed surveillance footage from the area. In several clips, they spotted Grace, and in some of them, she wasn't alone. She was seen walking and laughing with a young man. But at first, his identity remained unknown. To track him down, investigators turned to Grace's social media accounts. They combed through her posts and comments, searching for clues. That's when they found him, on her Facebook, commenting under her most recent photo. His name, according to the profile, was Jesse Kempson, and he lived in Auckland.
The police sent Jesse a message asking him to get in touch. They informed him that the girl he had met on Saturday was missing, and that he might be a valuable witness in the case. A few hours later, Jesse called back. He gave the police his address and confirmed that he had spent Saturday evening with Grace. He also claimed that they had parted ways around 10 p.m. in the city center, each going their separate ways.
But the police already had access to the elevator footage from the hotel where Jesse was staying. And this wasn't the answer they were expecting. The security cameras showed Jesse and Grace riding the elevator together to the 3rd floor. The next morning, just after 8 a.m., Jesse was seen riding the elevator down, alone. There was no footage of Grace ever leaving the hotel. After speaking with Jesse, detectives were convinced he was lying. That made him their prime suspect. It was time to question him formally. Meanwhile, another team of investigators was sent to search his apartment.
But they found nothing suspicious. No items belonging to the missing woman. No signs she had ever been there. It was as if Grace had simply vanished. If she entered the hotel and never left, then where was she now? And more importantly, was she still alive?
During the interrogation, Jesse repeated his earlier statement. He insisted that they had parted ways in the city center. The detectives were astonished by his testimony because, In their opinion, the suspect had been staying at that hotel for some time and must have been well aware of the cameras there. Yet throughout the questioning, he stubbornly claimed to know nothing. It was only when the investigators showed him photos from the surveillance footage that Jesse interrupted the interrogation. He asked for a lawyer and, after consulting with him, refused to make any further statements. Although the police knew he was lying, they released him on bail. They needed solid evidence to arrest him, and so far, they had none. They hoped to find it in other recordings that were still being collected. The missing girl's father arrived in New Zealand. At a special press conference, he appealed to all potential witnesses to come forward with any information. The police received several new leads, but none advanced the investigation. Meanwhile, detectives kept their focus on the suspect. They scoured CCTV footage and quickly pieced together his movements on the day after Grace disappeared.
We traced his route and found him in a nearby store. He bought a suitcase and cleaning supplies. Later, he went to a laundromat where he dropped off clothes to be washed. He was clearly very preoccupied with cleaning. We then decided to check his apartment again, this time using luminol, a chemical that makes blood glow under UV light.
An examination of the bedroom revealed a gruesome scene. Large bloodstains were visible on the carpet, which had been unsuccessfully cleaned with chemicals. Experts estimated that the amount of blood indicated the person who lost it had probably died. It could not be confirmed that the blood belonged to Grace, but the police now had the evidence they needed. Someone had died violently in the suspect's apartment. Further analysis of the surveillance footage allowed detectives to trace exactly what Jesse had been doing the day after Grace disappeared, and most importantly, where he had been. After buying a suitcase and cleaning supplies, he returned to the hotel. He ordered a taxi and, at 10:25 a.m., went to a car rental agency. 6 hours later, as if nothing had happened, he arranged a date with a woman he had met online. When he returned, he rented an industrial vacuum cleaner and thoroughly cleaned his apartment for over half an hour. At 9:30 p.m., he pushed a luggage cart into the elevator, struggling with a heavy stuffed suitcase behind him. After leaving the hotel, he went to the rental car and hid the suitcase in the trunk. He then drove away, not returning to his apartment until late at night.
The next day, he stopped at a hardware store and bought a spade. Then he got back into his car and drove away. 2.5 hours later, he returned. Surveillance cameras recorded him throwing a large black plastic bag into a trash can. Later, he drove to a car wash and cleaned the rental car, inside and out. He also threw the shovel into the trash.
Although the detectives only knew what they had seen on the recordings, they were already certain why Jesse had bought the shovel and what was in the suitcase he had taken from the hotel. The case was immediately reclassified as murder and concealment of a corpse. That same day, Jesse was arrested and taken to the Oakland police station. With his back against the wall, he admitted that Grace had died in his room but denied that it was murder. He presented his own version of events to the detectives. According to him, the 22-year-old had persuaded him to engage in rough sex with elements of BDSM. She asked him to tie her up tightly and take advantage of her. During intercourse, she demanded that he grab her by the neck and start choking her. He agreed, though he hesitated at first. When he went to the bathroom to take a shower, he was convinced his lover had fallen asleep. It was only when he came out and saw blood running from her nose that he realized she was not asleep. She was dead. At first, he intended to call an ambulance, but he panicked. He was afraid that the sight of paramedics would make them think he was a murderer and call the police. Having already been to prison for theft, he did not want to return to a cell, so he decided to get rid of the body. However, neither the police nor the prosecutor believed him. Jesse was charged with premeditated murder, dismemberment, and concealment of a corpse. He had no choice but to agree to show investigators where he had buried the suitcase.
It was December 9th, a nightmarish day. Any person, any parent would have broken down. I have a daughter of a similar age myself. We found Grace's body just 10 meters from the main road, less than 20 kilometers from where she was last seen alive. Shortly afterward, her father took his daughter's body home to England.
The next day, the New Zealand media reported on the gruesome discovery. The public in the country was shocked. Crowds took to the streets demanding justice and punishment for the perpetrator. During a press conference, the Prime Minister of New Zealand publicly apologized to Grace's family for the tragedy that had befallen them. As she spoke, the Prime Minister herself was in tears. Just before the killer's trial, a bizarre situation arose. At the request of Jesse's defense attorneys, his name was to be kept secret. But almost all British newspapers ignored the court's ruling and published the defendant's full details. This was publicly criticized by the New Zealand Minister of Justice, though the criticism was received almost as a joke in the UK, which was still shocked by the murder. During the trial, the true face of the man who killed Grace came to light. Witnesses described him as a cynical manipulator and a notorious liar who constantly fabricated stories about himself. He introduced himself to women he met online as a music manager, lawyer, or sports star. He liked to elicit pity, complaining, for example, that his mother was dying of cancer.
What's more, several women who later found comfort in his arms accused him of rape. One woman testified that after a date, she found herself in his apartment. Once there, Jesse became vulgar and aggressive. He demanded rough sex, which she refused. Then he started to strangle her. He only stopped when he realized his would-be victim was dead. But she had been pretending. At the first opportunity, she escaped from the apartment and left the hotel. She did not report the assault to the police out of fear that her attacker would find her and take revenge.
The medical examiner testified that Grace had been strangled. However, he emphasized that it was not an accidental death caused by sex gone wrong. The pressure applied to the victim's neck was very strong and lasted about 5 minutes before she died. According to the expert, this confirmed the intent to deliberately take her life. The defense tried at all costs to push the theory of an unfortunate accident. However, the prosecution had a devastating response to such claims. They presented the results of the analysis of the 26-year-old defendant's phone. The data showed that within hours after the death, he had typed phrases like, "Where in the country are scavenger birds found?" and "How to obtain the highest temperature fire" into an internet browser. When he didn't find satisfactory answers, he began searching for how to effectively dispose of a body and hide a corpse. Such queries are hardly made by someone with a clear conscience. The defendant initially remained calm and composed in the courtroom. At times, he even gave the impression that it wasn't his trial. But as the darker side of the perpetrator began to emerge, he broke down and started to cry. However, not everyone believed his tears. The public saw him as a skilled con artist, interpreting his displays of remorse as another feigned role designed to help him avoid the harshest sentence. The defense attorney's references to his difficult childhood and the trauma he experienced after his parents' divorce were also to no avail. His parents separated when he was only 9 years old. He never came to terms with it. His brother stayed with their mother, while he, although unwilling, went to live with his father, who abused him physically and mentally. Raised with a sense of inferiority, he began to lie to appear much better in the eyes of others than he really was. However, as the New Zealand media emphasized, he was not the only one to have a difficult childhood, and even the worst upbringing cannot justify such a terrible act as murder. The jury, composed of 7 women and 5 men, shared this opinion. They were not swayed by his tear-stained face. After 5 hours of deliberation, Jesse Campson was unanimously found guilty on all charges. The judge announced the sentence: life imprisonment with the possibility of parole, but not before serving 17 years.
When the verdict was announced, everyone in the courtroom gave vent to their emotions. The jurors, police officers, and journalists cried. The audience cried. No murder case in New Zealand had ever sparked such a public outcry. Many people even regretted that the country did not have the death penalty, believing he deserved nothing less.
Jesse never admitted to the murder. To this day, he insists that Grace's death was the result of an unfortunate accident. He has appealed the sentence several times, which he believes to be grossly unfair. The most recent appeal was on June 29, 2021. However, all his appeals were rejected by the New Zealand Court of Appeal. As a result, he has been deprived of the right to appeal again. He will therefore not be eligible for release until 2037 at the earliest, although, as New Zealand criminal law experts unanimously emphasize, the chances of him ever leaving prison are very slim. Dark File, chilling true stories.